The anime started with Sung Jinwoo, who is your typical Chad. Joking, he's an ugly loser with nothing on his life. His father went to buy milk and his mother is in a coma. This leaves him a broke, useless guy who must feed his younger sister with his E-rank hunter skills. 10 years ago, huge gates appeared all around the planet releasing several monsters to destroy the population. Humanity had no chance to fight them as weapons didn't deal any damage. Yet, suddenly some humans awakened some special powers. Those humans are known as hunters. Hunters are classified based on their magical power from E rank to S rank. Humanity managed to survive for the next couple years with these new powers, but they still must clear the dungeons that show up. If they don't, the dungeon will accumulate magic and open up, releasing monsters back into the world. 3 years ago that thing happened in a nearby island. S-rank dungeon wasn't cleared and monsters filled the island. Hunters tried to clear it, but in the end the ant monsters were stronger. Present day, we see several men around a construction site. One of them, named Kim, is getting some coffee as the server wishes him good luck with today's raid. Another guy named Park calls Kim out. Kim asks him what he's doing here. Is he quit being a hunter? Park explains that his wife is pregnant, therefore he needs to make some money. Kim replies that there's nothing better than a good raid to make some money. However, Park is worried because his skills were already bad and he feels he will be worse since he hasn't raided in a while. Suddenly, everyone's attention turns to Jinwoo, who's just arriving at the scene. Jinwoo stays humble, mentioning that he's looking forward to work with everyone today. Even Kim greets Jinwoo asking if he's already eaten. Jinwoo confirms and continues walking. Park gets curious and asks if Jinwoo is a strong hunter since everyone seems happy to see him. Yet, Kim giggles as he realizes that Kim retired before Jinwoo started to raid. Kim reveals that Jinwoo has a special nickname, the weakest hunter of all mankind. Park is confused because he was expecting something like the strongest. Kim explained that Jinwoo is an E-rank hunter who always gets injured even in E-rank gates, therefore, people call him the weakest hunter. However, Kim thinks that since Jinwoo is here, this dungeon is going to be easy to complete. Kim tells Park to stop talking about it because Jinwoo might hear them. However, Jinwoo sighs as he could hear everything. While walking, Jinwoo hears a familiar voice mentioning that he's hurt again. He notices Juhee and greets her, mentioning it's good to see her again. She asks about what happened to his face, but he replies that some stuff happened. She asks what happened to him and he decides to explain the story. She finds out he ended up hospitalized and he reveals that despite raiding E-rank dungeon, he was the only one who got hurt. She's confused on how, but he explains that everyone else was high-ranked so they didn't bring in healer. She complains about it because they think everyone is overconfident they wouldn't get hurt. Yet Jinwoo admits that it's his fault because he's weak, but still he's already used to getting hurt. Jinwoo then notices it's about time to start raiding and tells her to get going. They meet Song Cheol, an experienced hunter who asks if they're fine with him taking charge and being the party leader. Since he's the highest rank, everyone agrees. With all set, they open the gate and enter the dungeon. As they get in, Kim tells Jinwoo to stay close to avoid getting hurt. Jinwoo pulls out his knife, mentioning this is the only piece of equipment he can afford, but still he will give his best today, and enters the dungeon. Meanwhile, Go Gun-hee, the president of the Hunter Association, tells his right hand that he met the government who asked them to avoid dungeon breaks. However, they also demanded them to supply goods that have been acquired inside dungeons. He doesn't feel like those demands are unbearable as they make money from reselling goods obtained from the dungeons. Those goods are crystals that people obtain from slaying monsters. Inside the dungeon, Jinwoo is seen covered in blood with a crystal in his hand. He's happy that he managed to defeat a weak goblin, but Juhee tells him to be careful. Another goblin attacks him, but he manages to block the attack. The goblin continues attacking, but he evades everything. He gets a chance to attack and tries to piece the goblin. Yet, upon contact his blade shatters. The goblin wastes no time to stab him. Juhee is worried about him, but Park comes forward and defeats the goblin. Jinwoo removes the blade from his stomach and lays on the floor as he's losing blood. Park tells Juhee to heal Jinwoo while he defeats the nearby monsters. Juhee rushes to Jinwoo's aid and starts using her healing skills. While being healed, Jinwoo sees everyone easily defeating the monsters and feels envious. President Go continues to explain that essence stones obtained from high-rank monsters can be used to make stronger weapons, which in return enables hunters to defeat stronger monsters. He also mentions they can obtain mana crystals mined from dungeons and make weapons with it. However, its quality ain't that effective. His right hand doesn't understand why the government wants them, and President Go explains they want to use them to create a new type of energy, safer than nuclear and more efficient than the normal energy sources. That will lead to less pollution, creating a true green energy, but they can only create it if the hunters clear the dungeons. Back in the dungeon, Jinwoo was healed and the group managed to defeat the boss. Joo-hee is healing him again and asks why does he want to become a hunter so badly. She explains that if he keeps doing the same thing over and over again he will find himself in big trouble. Jinwoo apologizes, but Joo-hee complains she doesn't want an apology, she's just worried about him. Song talks to everyone, explaining the raid is about done and everyone starts talking about their drops. Jinwoo then looks at his essence stone and feels pity for himself. He risked his life, just a pitiful reward. Suddenly, another guy shouts, mentioning there's another entrance nearby. Everyone is confused, but Song reveals that sometimes there is double dungeons. Some see this as something strange, but most of them think this means their rewards will be bigger. Song talks to the group, explaining that the dungeon gate doesn't close unless they also defeat the second dungeon's boss. Usually they should report this situation to the Hunter Association and wait for a decision, but that also means other hunters might come and steal this boss. He decides to make everyone vote if they should go for it or not. There is 13 members in total, half of them vote yes while the rest votes no. Jinwoo is the one who will decide the fate of the party with his vote. Jinwoo thinks to himself that this dungeon is too dangerous for him, but he's broke and he must find a way to send his sister through college. He also has to pay the fees for his mother treatment, therefore, to protect his family he decides to say yes. Meanwhile, we see some people perform their Hunter Awakening examination in the Hunter Association. A guy places his hand on a black crystal and they measure his amount of power. We find out that there are several groups called guilds. They recruit hunters with potential and train them in order to complete dungeon raids. However, the strongest hunter in the country is known as Cha Haein, a guild vice leader. She's a cutie blondie who's an S rank. Back inside the dungeon, some members think they're venturing too deep. They've been walking for 40 minutes already and mention they have 1 hour to leave the dungeon after defeating the boss. Therefore, they have about 20 minutes of leeway. Jinwoo uses this chance to apologize to Joo-hee. She asks why and he explains that he's the reason why she was forced to stay and defeat the second boss. Joo-hee says she's okay and he shouldn't worry about her. He insists asking if she's sure, but Joo-hee reveals that she's mad. She yells at him asking if he's a psycho. She explains that if he was stabbed a little higher he would have a hole in his chest. Not only that, but his arms and legs were almost removed. She also reveals that her B-rank healing barely managed to heal him. She calls him reckless and asks why did he agree to come. She asks if he hurt his head and asks for an answer. Jinwoo apologizes and thinks to himself that the only reason why he's still alive is because Joo-hee is a B-rank healer. If it wasn't for her, he would be dead. She asks if he's really sorry and he confirms. She suddenly flirts with him, mentioning that he should repay her with a dinner date. Jinwoo is confused, but she gets mad asking if he doesn't want to spend time with her. Jinwoo blushes, literally explaining she's out of his league, but he would love to. Suddenly, someone mentions they have arrived to the boss room. Some members are confused because they never found a boss room with a door before. They think this is strange, but Kim asks if they're going to head back empty-handed after coming this way. He claims that they could be the first ones to discover the new dungeon, therefore, if anyone wants to return they can. However, he will be going and even if it's alone. Meanwhile, the guy who performed his hunter examination is watching President go in a video. In short, he explains how careful they should always be and survive despite their rank. Back in the dungeon, they all open the doors and step inside. The torches all around the room start to light up as they step in. Some are impressed as they've never seen anything like this room, but they should hurry up and look around. The group sees several statues standing around the room and Jinwoo notices another one sitting on what it seems to be a throne. Jinwoo thinks this one is the bigger one, but the group starts to mention how they feel like they're being watched. They then notice something strange. There are no monsters inside the room. Song then notices the floor and sees what it seems to be a magic circle. Kim calls Song out, mentioning there is a statue with something written. Everyone gets near the angel statue and notice the inscription. Song reads it out loud, mentioning those are the commandments of the garden and temple. First, they must worship God. Second, praise the God. Third, believe in God and those who don't obey should die. Joo-hee freaks out and calls Jinwoo, mentioning the eyes of the giant statue moved and looked at them. Jinwoo was confused and says she must be imagining. Suddenly the door closes. Everyone freaks out wondering if they're trapped. One of the members starts walking towards the door, complaining they didn't want to come here in the first place. He touches the door and suddenly a statue moves and slices his head off. Everyone is shocked and starts screaming. Jinwoo falls into despair, thinking about the rank of the guy who just died. He knows the guy was way stronger than himself. The statue returns to the original position, but Jinwoo still cannot move as the guy was killed in an instant. He doesn't understand who this monster could be in a D-rank dungeon. Jinwoo then looks at the bigger statue, paying attention to every detail until he sees its eyes moving to look at him. Jinwoo starts having a flashback about the moments he faced life and death situations. He was separated from his team during his first raid and ended up injured by E-rank monsters, forcing him to spend several weeks in the hospital. Later, he almost starved to death while trapped in a maze. He explains that hunters spend their money earned from essence stones to buy more weapons to defeat stronger monsters. However, he always only had money to buy cheap butter knives. If the knives broke, he would be forced to fight the monsters with his fists. He didn't even have money for clothes, but he kept going. He never earned much money and was always mocked by other hunters. Therefore, he always looked for loopholes to survive. He had to observe everything in detail to get his chance. Upon returning to reality, Jinwoo shouts at them to get down. The statue shoots a laser beam with its eyes, slaying several hunters. The ones who survived are shocked at this scene and start to panic. Luckily, Jinwoo managed to save Juhee, but she's panicking in fear. He looks around confused about what happened and how they ended up like this. He knows they're trapped and cannot escape. In the end, he freaks out because he knows they will all die. The story continues. Upon looking around, everyone's minds only think about running. Yet, Song orders them to stand still because if they get up they will be attacked. Juhee is still shaking in fear and Jinwoo tries to calm her down. Song approaches Jinwoo and tells that if he didn't warn them, everyone would be dead by now. He asks how Jinwoo knew about it, but he replies that he just sensed danger. Jinwoo then notices that Song's arm is missing, but the old man says it's okay and asks him to stop the bleeding. Jinwoo warps bandages around Song's arm. Song explains that usually he would ask Juhee to heal him, but she cannot deal with frightening situations. For that reason, she's only going on easy raids, despite being a rank B healer. Song also reveals that he's been into some B rank raids, but knows that this place must be a rank dungeon, but he then corrects himself saying this is an S rank dungeon. He then remembers the angel statue and the commandments of the garden and temple. He repeats the commandments and Jinwoo thinks the god mentioned on those rules is the big statue. Meanwhile, Jinwoo's younger sister Jina is at school talking to her friend Sonny, who missed the early classes. However, Sonny ignores her question and asks if Jina's brother is a hunter. Jina confirms but mentions that despite Jinwoo's improved body as a hunter, he always suffers injuries. Back in the dungeon, Song tells Jinwoo it's a bad idea to fight the statue and they should find a way to escape. However, there's a brain-damaged guy who refuses to die like this. He starts powering up his power, mentioning he just signed a contract with a major guild and don't want to die here. Song orders the guy to not move. However, the guy starts running forward, mentioning that he's confident that he's faster against every single opponent. He runs toward the door, but the huge statue looks at him. In the end, his body disappears, only leaving his feet. Everyone starts to panic and Jinwoo mentions the statues could easily kill everyone inside. Song confirms it, making Jinwoo wonder why the statue hasn't killed them yet. Usually monsters attack them blindly, but the statue isn't. He then thinks about the commandments and asks Song what was the first one. Song replies it's to worship the god. With those words, Jinwoo thinks this dungeon has some special rules. He gets up with a plan, which initially Song tries to stop him, but after seeing the look in Jinwoo's eyes, Song is sure that he hasn't given up in life. With courage, Jinwoo gets up and notices the statue preparing to attack. He suddenly kneels down and notices the statue stop the attack. He tells everyone to kneel down to the statue, making everyone confused. Song asks if he figured something out and Jinwoo confirm it, mentioning that as long as their heads are below a certain height, the statue won't attack. In short, this is what the first commandment means. He then bows down and Song asks if he's sure. Jinwoo thinks he is and everyone follows his movements. Everyone questions if they will be able to survive by doing this, but the statue's eyes deactivate. Suddenly, the statue starts smiling, making everyone afraid of its expression. They realize the statue isn't attacking them and one of the guys gets up and starts celebrating because the statue won't attack them. The others get up thinking they're saved, but Jinwoo knows this isn't over yet. Suddenly, the huge statue gets up and they scream because they thought this was all over. Song asks Jinwoo what to do next, but our boy doesn't know yet. The statue starts walking forward and Jinwoo mentions that they cannot violate the commandments. He then tells everyone the second commandment to praise the god. Everyone is confused on how they should do it, but another guy steps forward. He claims that he knows how to praise God because of his traditional folklore research. In short, this guy kneels and starts praying. The statue starts to slow down and looks at the guy. However, Jinwoo senses something strange because those are not the words to praise this god. The statue smiles as it lifts its foot while the guy continues praying. In the end, the statue steps on top of him, everyone panics and starts running, but the statue continues stepping on top of some others. The statue starts chasing everyone and one of the guys runs near a statue. His friend tries to warn him to look out behind, but that statue moves and slices him in half. Jinwoo takes Julie to run while thinking about how they can praise the god. She's still panicking and he thinks that he needs to save her. He looks around to the other statues and compares their weapons, until he notices there are some statues with some musical instruments. After a quick thinking, he yells at everyone to get under the statues that have them. Song is confused but follows the orders. The statue starts playing the instrument and Song tells everyone to follow the advice as those statues won't attack them. More people get under those statues and feel relieved because they have been spared. Meanwhile, Jinwoo and Juhee manage to reach a statue but it doesn't play. Jinwoo quickly understands the statue won't play because two persons cannot be under the same statue. He orders Juhee to stay under this statue while he goes to the next one. She tries to stop him but he runs as the huge statue chases him. Juhee's statue starts playing the instrument and Jinwoo finds the next one. He's almost stepped by the huge statue, but he manages to avoid rolling towards another one. This statue has a shield who also tries to kill him. Juhee starts screaming his name, but Jinwoo managed to avoid fatal damage. He slowly crawls to the next statue, determined to not give up. The huge statue is still walking behind him and prepares to step on him. Suddenly, the statue generally was crawling to start singing. The huge statue barely missed his body, but Jinwoo feels relieved as he made it, and he thinks this is the answer to praise God, and the huge statue sits down on its throne. Juhee runs towards him and asks if he's fine. Jinwoo confirms, but upon looking down notices that he lost one leg. She tries to heal him with all her power, but he says that he's okay. She refuses to stop, but she ends using so much of her power and she starts coughing blood. The group looks around and thinks this is tragic. Yet, despite Song losing one of his arms, some members who voted yes blame him for this situation. Song apologizes for forcing them into a decision and decides to bear all responsibility. Jinwoo watches the discussion and thinks this is not the time to argue with each other because there's still one last commandment. The statue suddenly raises its and an altar raises in the middle of the room. Everyone is confused, but Jinwoo replies that's a common thing in mythology. In short, the statue wants them to make a living sacrifice to the god. That's the final commandment, to believe in God. Everyone gets shocked, but one of the members who voted yes reveals that he knows what this means. He grabs his sword and points at Song and mentioning they need a sacrifice. He goes on to blame Song because his friend wanted to provide for his family and got sliced in half, and since Song claimed that he would take responsibility, he wants Song to sacrifice himself for all the lives they lost. With those words, Song decides to accept his fate as the party leader. He walks toward the altar. Upon reaching close to the altar, a flame appears. Everyone is confused, but Song asks Jinwoo what he needs to do. Jinwoo is still confused about this, thinking they don't need a living sacrifice. He apologizes for the inconvenience and asks if they can take him to the altar so that he can check it. When the three reach near the altar, 3 more flames appear. Song asks if he has figured out something, but Jinwoo hasn't. He wonders if someone will come to rescue them if they wait there. Song explains that since this dungeon has been around for 7 days, the Hunter Association will probably take some actions before they come to rescue them. Jinwoo thinks that if they fail here, this huge statue will run wild into their world. Meanwhile, Jina goes to the hospital to visit her mother like she does every day. She talks about her day and how her friend was late and her future plans. Back inside the dungeon, Jinwoo tells Juhee and the top anime betrays to come to the altar. Despite hesitation, the 2 steps inside, making 2 more flames appear. Suddenly, the altar unleashes some electricity and a new ring of blue flames appear around. The dungeon door suddenly opens up, making everyone worried because this could be a trap. One of the blue flames disappears and the statues start to light up and move forward. They all start to freak out while Jinwoo looks around and notices a strange mechanic. He tells everyone to not close their eyes and look at the statues because they will stop moving. In short, this is basically a game where they all must keep their eyes on those statues. Everyone follows his instructions and the statues stop moving. However, some members are too anxious and start running away from the circle. One of the normal flames extinguished, but she managed to leave the room. The door, however, is starting to close. Song asks Jinwoo if he knows what happened, but he's confused. He thinks about the 3 commandments and thinks the door is a trap because the last one is to believe in God. He believes the door is just to give them a false sense of hope because they're afraid. This is a way to test everyone's faith in the statue. However, another guy also gives in into this hope and throws Jinwoo aside before running toward the door. More people think about leaving, but Jinwoo explains that if someone else leaves, the statues will able to move because of a blind spot. Song wants a better explanation, to which Jinwoo replies they cannot move their eyes from the statues. He explains that the blue flames extinguish, everyone will be able to escape. Yet, there are members who think that if the flames go out, they will be locked inside. The guy reveals he didn't expect Jinwoo, the weakest hunter, to be the most useful one. He thanks him for allowing them to survive, but the guy starts to cry and apologizes before running away. Jinwoo starts crying, asking why they betrayed him. He refuses to give up and desires to survive by quickly looking at every statue. Yet, Song orders Joo-hee and Jinwoo to escape while he stays behind. He thinks that as long as one person stays behind, the door won't close. However, Joo-hee's legs give up. Upon hearing those words, Jinwoo tells Song to take Joo-hee and leave. Joo-hee tries to refuse, but Jinwoo gets angry and shouts that he has no foot so he cannot help her. She starts complaining, but Song knocks her out because they are running out of time. Song then carries Joo-hee outside the door, making Jinwoo relieved because he's the only one who will die. He notices a sword on the ground and picks it up while the statues continue walking. He raises it, promising that he will take one of them to be his best buddy in hell. The statues start attacking him, but he manages to dodge. The statues again attack him, making him lose one arm, followed by several other attacks. He shouts in pain, mentioning that he also wanted to become stronger, but he can't. After several attacks, he's barely alive, but refuses to give up. The statues stab his shoulder, and he remembers those who just betrayed him, trying to justify it by mentioning their family. This is all selfishness, because he also has a family that he wants to return and take care. In the end, the statue lifts him into the air and throws him into the altar while preparing for the last attack. He cries as he doesn't want to die and wishes one last chance. As the statue is about to slice him, the last blue flame goes out. A system message appears asking if he wants to become a player. He says yes. The story continues. We see Jinwoo wakes up in the hospital in shock. He notices that he still has his arm and pulls the blanket to check if he has his leg. After confirming, he thinks that he was stabbed through the chest, but there's no mark. He thinks this was all a dream until someone knocks on the door. The guy is impressed that Jinwoo is awake and introduces himself, Woo Jin-chul, a manager of the Hunters Association surveillance team. Jinwoo wonders what they want from him, but Jin-chul first asks his partner to get the doctor here. That's when Jinwoo finds out he was unconscious for the past 3 days. He asks about Joo-hee and Song, but the guy confirms they're fine despite Song losing his arm. As a result, he will be forced to retire as a hunter. Joo-hee, on the other hand, is still traumatized and getting psychiatric care. In her case, she won't probably continue working as a hunter. Jinwoo thinks about everything that happened, and Jin-chul mentions that only 6 people survived that dungeon. He says that working as a hunter is dangerous, but it's still rare to see this type of outcome. However, he mentions that something was strange. The White Tiger Guild came to the dungeon after being alerted by the guys who ran away. However, they never saw a second room. All they saw was Jinwoo collapsed on the ground. They investigated but found no evidence of the so-called temple or statues that everyone described. Jinwoo and Jin-chul think that's unbelievable. However, every survivor said the same thing, and they found the bodies of the ones who died. Therefore, the Hunter Association cannot suspect the rest of the group for PK everyone. Jin-chul, however, reveals they suspect Jinwoo of experiencing a second awakening. Jinwoo is shocked to hear those words and remembers all he was taught. A hunter's power is determined when they awaken their power and never changes. However, there are some rare cases where a hunter goes through a second awakening. Some of them goes from low ranks to rank A or even rank S. Jinwoo tries to hide his excitement about this possibility. They then pull out a gadget to measure his power and tell him to put his hand over it. Jinwoo smiles, thinking this is his lucky day, and puts his hand. Jin-chul, however, is thinking that it was impossible for Jinwoo to survive that type of described dungeon because he's weak, and since there isn't any evidence of the monsters, he thinks Jinwoo became either rank A or S. However, his score is a big fat 10. Jinwoo is excited to hear the result and what rank he will get now. Jin-chul, however, apologizes for the mistake because Jinwoo are still worse than trash. They leave, and Jin-chul's assistant mentions that every other E-rank hunter managed to get 70 or higher. While walking, Jin-chul thinks they cannot explore that dungeon because it disappeared, but he still doesn't understand how Jinwoo survived. Meanwhile, Jinwoo are in his room thinking sorry for himself, yet he's confused because they never asked him about the screen in front of him. The screen shows that he has unread messages, and he thinks that he's the only one who can see it. He clicks on the screen, but it doesn't react. He suddenly remembers that when he was about to die, the screen showed that he completed the secret quest Courage of the Weak. Suddenly, Gina enters into the room and starts berating him. She tells him to take care of himself because that makes her worried. He apologizes and she complains, mentioning that he always ends up in the hospital while the others are fine. He looks at her and cannot believe he was prepared to leave her behind. He smiles at her, but she complains again. If this happens again, she will quit school and get a job so that he can quit being a hunter. He apologizes again and asks if she can see the Windows screen. She's confused and asks what he is talking about. He apologizes and asks her about games. He wants to know how he can read unread messages, but she thinks he's crazy and should get another medical checkup. He replies that she used to play tons of games and she gives up, replying that he would be able to read it by opening his message box. He repeats those words and the message is open. He notices that he has a daily quest called Strength Training has arrived. He thinks for a bit and remembers the word player was mentioned before. Gina in the end gives up and leaves. Meanwhile, Jinwoo starts reading everything about the system. In short, it was made to help him develop. However, if he fails to follow the system, he will get a penalty. He then sees a screen mentioning the rewards have arrived and gets confused. He then accepts the daily quest and notices that he will become bald like Saitama. He must do 100 push-ups, sit-ups, squats and then run 10 kilometers. If he doesn't complete them, he will be punished. Jinwoo laughs, mentioning he's in the hospital, therefore that's impossible to do, and takes a nap. Meanwhile, Jinchul is in the car telling his boss on a call that Jinwoo is still trash. The boss is at least happy the monsters didn't leave the dungeon and started to roam on the streets. However, this is still pretty much confusing. Jinchul confirms this is weird and they decide to mark this case as something special that will be revised on the future. Meanwhile, in another guild building, the guild leader tells his strongest member Cha to participate in a B-rank dungeon as instructor. She is confused because she's an S rank, but he explains that raid will be a test and practical training for their new recruits. Yet, she still doubts her ability as a mentor. The leader replies she just needs to beat the monsters as usual and everyone will learn from watching. She hesitates, but the guy mentions their guild is on the top 5 of the country, but they're unseen in the international level. He knows their ranks cannot improve, but their teamwork can. Hours later, a gate suddenly appears in the middle of the road. The military takes care of the whole situation while everyone wonders when the hunters are going to show up. Back in the hospital, Jinwoo is still sleeping. The daily quest timer runs down and warns that he failed. Suddenly, the ground starts shaking and Jinwoo wakes up. He ends up falling from his bed, but when he opens his eyes, he sees himself in the middle of the desert. He's confused about what's happening and thinks this is just a dream. However, there is a giant desert centipede looking at him. The system window then shows up and tells him to survive for the next 4 hours. Jinwoo is shocked and starts running. Meanwhile, the nurses check his room and notice that it's empty. Jinwoo is doing his best to run and scream from this huge centipede, but more appear. He's been running for 2 hours already. The nurses are looking for him, but they never find him. Luckily, Jinwoo manages to run for the whole 4 hours and returns to his room. The system alerts that he completed his penalty quest, but he collapses before checking the rewards. The nurses then enter his room again and get shocked to see him. The next day, Jinwoo finally gives up being a lazy loser and gets up from bed. He tells his sister on the phone that he will be released soon. After hanging the call, he gets up and starts doing his quest. Days later, Joo-hee receives a call inviting her to join a D-rank dungeon. She thinks about rejecting it and apologizes. The guy on the phone then mentions Jinwoo already awoke and she decides to visit him. At the hospital, she hears the nurses complaining about Jinwoo running and exercising. They complain that hunters are supposed to heal faster than normal people, but they think he's crazy for doing this. Joo-hee looks outside the window and sees Jinwoo running. He takes a small break and talks about this situation. It's been 4 days since the Windows system appeared. Every time he completes the quest he gets 3 types of rewards. He accepts full recovery and returns back to normal as if he never exercised. The other reward is 3 points that he can distribute to any ability he wants. He adds them to his strength and starts to feel stronger. He then talks about having skill and inventory screens. However, he still thinks this is quite strange and he thinks this is just like a game, but everyone around thinks he's crazy. Upon returning to his room, Jinwoo decides to open his final reward, the random loot box. This time he got a key. He's confused because he always got stuff like pens or bandages. Upon checking the information, the system reveals he can use it to enter an instance dungeon in a specific location. He's confused with this, but thinks this is some sort of event that will help him get stronger. Meanwhile, nobody has raided the dungeon that appeared in the middle of the road, the news reveal in which locations new gates appeared. Therefore, everyone should expect traffic delays. Jinwoo uses this time to visit his mother in the other hospital. 4 years ago, she suddenly collapsed in front of him. Turns out that she now suffers from the eternal sleep disease. This is a new disease that appeared when the dungeon gates appeared in the world, and it only affects 1 in every several 10,000 people. But in short, this only happens when the person is exposed to mana for several times and there's no cure. Jinwoo returns to his room to do push-ups while remembering when he tried to have a normal job. He was slow and weak when suddenly it became easier. It turns out he just awakened as a hunter. He thought this was his lucky day as he could go into the dungeons and be able to pay for his mother's life support. His sister thought it was dangerous, but he told her to trust him. But in the end, even the weakest goblins were able to beat him. Everyone had to save him and complain about his skills. They even expressed that if it didn't help the raid, his cut would be reduced. However, Jinwoo simply smiled and apologized, but now if he puts all his ability points into strength, he will be able to become strong. He decides to check the instance dungeon key and goes to a station. He feels confident about his gear and ability to run if he needs to. He then pulls out the key and suddenly a key lock appears. He inserts it and a dungeon appears out of nowhere. He enters that portal and sees the system alert. Suddenly the dungeon exit gets blocked. Jinwoo then sees normal people leaving the station and realizes this is a separate dimension. He thinks this kind of dungeon is something like a red gate. He thinks this is a mess because he cannot run away, but the system explains that he can only leave by defeating the boss or using a teleportation stone. He's confused, but he knows he must beat this dungeon. He still doubts himself. After all, he couldn't defeat the weakest monsters. How would he be able to solo raid this dungeon? He looks at his knife and knows he has no choice. He walks down the stairs and scouts the dungeon. Suddenly, 3 goblins appear in front of him. He's scared and remembers the last time he met a goblin he was stabbed. The monsters attack, but he manages to dodge and parry. He's still a total noob when it comes to fighting and almost gets deleted. He manages to roll like a god dago and avoid the next incoming strike. He then rushes forward and stabs the goblin. The other 2 try to attack him from behind, but he dodges and follows up by killing the 2. He realizes that he became stronger, yet a wolf appears behind him. The wolf dashes at him and he tries to block. However, his cheap butter knife breaks again. He notices the wolf has a meal jaw and knows this is way stronger than the goblins. He wants to run, but his legs are shaking. He starts to freak out and thinks that he became traumatized by the last dungeon. The wolf runs at him and manages to scratch his face. Jinwoo realizes that he has no healer. If he dies here, he's dead. The wolf then starts running again and lunges at him. The story continues. We see Wolf pounces on Jinwoo, but he dodges away with some impressive acrobatics. He notices his body now feels much lighter than usual. He lands on his feet easily and he decides to overcome his fear and not give up his chance at a second life. He rushes at the wolf and lands a super punch that sends it flying. Jinwoo notices his land steaming from the punch. He wonders if it is a result of his increase in strength. The wolf gets back to his feet and Jinwoo realizes it's still much stronger than him. The wolf charges at him again and Jinwoo counters with his punches, but this time they are not effective. He has no choice but to dodge out of the way to avoid the wolf attack. Jinwoo realizes that he would need some help to defeat the wolf. Since he has no party with him, he decides to make use of the resources at his disposal. He makes a run for it, but the wolf claws at his shin. He jumps to create space between them, but he knows he can't keep this up. He wishes he had some kind of magical weapon to use against the wolf. Then he remembers his secret inventory. He opens it up and draws out a magic sword, and as the wolf lunges at him again, he slices it cleanly into 2. A notification screen comes up telling him he has defeated the wolf and leveled up. Jinwoo wonders how the sword got into his inventory because it cost a lot of money, which he knows he can't afford, but he decides not to worry about that. His wounds heal up and he realizes his body doesn't hurt anymore. 2 more steel-fanged wolves show up, but Jinwoo isn't bothered because he now has a weapon to defeat them. He tries to lift up the sword from where it was plunged into the ground, but he can't. Jinwoo starts to panic as the wolves get even closer. He desperately begs the sword to come out of the ground, and he pulls it one more time to dislodge it. The wolves are already lunging at him, but he swings the sword on time to take out one. He swings at the other ones, but it catches it with its steel fangs. Jinwoo doesn't want the wolf to damage his sword after that it took him to get it. He kicks the side of the wolf to make it lose its grip and he defeats the wolf. Another wolf appears out of nowhere and Jinwoo aren't a bit bothered because these wolves are nothing compared to the monsters he faced in the secret room. Jinwoo faced the wolf, but it turns and runs away with its tail between its legs. Jinwoo decides to rest against the wall. He realizes he's now level 2 after getting into actual combat. He never leveled up when he was doing daily quests. His wounds heal up and he notices his stats have all increased by 1 point, making a total of 5 points. Performing daily quests only gave him 3 points. He wonders how much his strength will increase with each point added to his stats. He doesn't know how his stats of intelligence and perception were quantified, but he knows how much his strength increases with each point added. He speculates that he'll be able to get more points the higher his basic ability of that stat is. He realizes he can actually get stronger, but he doesn't want to get carried away from defeating 5 small monsters. He gets up to check for magic gems on the bodies of the wolves. A notification comes up telling him he got an item instead of a magic gem, and he takes out the item, which is a wolf fawn. Jinwoo wonders if the beast he encounters in this dungeon will differ from the gate in reality, since it all seems to be controlled by a game system. The shop screen comes up and Jinwoo tries to buy something, but the game system tells him new players can't buy anything. He decides to sell the fawn and he gets 20 gold coins in return. He wonders what the equivalent would be in cash. He knows it can't be worth much because he's in an E-ranked dungeon. He picks up his sword wondering what to do. He has to defeat the dungeon boss or get the teleportation stone to get out, but he doesn't know where either is. He doesn't feel confident he can defeat the dungeon boss alone, but he thinks he stands a chance if he continues to level up. He suddenly looks up to see an entire pack of the wolves lurking in the shadows. The wolf that ran away went back to call the rest of the family, but Jinwoo isn't scared anymore. They charge at him, but he charges at them all in defiance as well. He slashes and slices them as they dive him. One wolf gets on his back, but he shrugs it off. He's now surrounded by wolves, and he hopes to enjoy the battle, hoping the wolves don't die too easily. His past flashes before his eyes, and a smile crosses his face. He engages all the wolves, happy to battle as long as he gets to level up. He levels up as he cuts them down, and he finally defeats them all, earning the title of Wolf Assassin. Jinwoo is sweating from exhaustion and he realizes his sword is almost broken. He realizes that his weapons are expendable, and they'll eventually wear off, but he's glad the battle is over. He looks over his inventory to look at the items he got from the battle and what remains from his previous inventory. He gets the teleportation stone for completing the battle. He thought it would be much harder to get, and he contemplates leaving the dungeon, but he doesn't know if he'll get another chance to become stronger so easily. He wonders if the dungeon will disappear like a time-limited event in a game if he leaves. He tells like he's being toyed with by a supreme entity and he has no way of escape. He decides to store the stone in his inventory and continue deeper into the dungeon. Juhee gets a call from the Hunter Association and she apologizes for her earlier actions. They tell her a dungeon close by had a break and they need her help because they are short of healers. As Jinwoo goes deeper into the dungeon, he defeats several new beasts and he levels up as he does so, making it easier to defeat each new beast. He takes a while to catch his breath. Through his battles, he noticed that the color of the names of the creatures shows that he's weaker on the same level or stronger than them. When he faced the first wolf, its name was red, but the names of wolf appearing are now colored white. Jinwoo arrives at a flight of stairs and he perceives that he can't defeat the monster waiting at the end of it. He looks at his stats and he notices his level hasn't increased for a while now. His sword is also on the verge of breaking into bits, but he decides to go down the stairs. He gets to the end of it and he realizes the place doesn't look like a train station anymore. He hears a rushing sound and he turns to face it. He sees the monster coming to him at full speed, but he can't react fast enough. The monster knocks him back into the wall and his sword breaks. The area boss, which is a water snake, reveals itself and Jinwoo looks at the color of its names and realizes they are the same level. He looks at the scales of the snake and he realizes his sword would be useless against it, but going barehanded would be even worse. The snake strikes at him, but he uses his sword to deflect the snake's attack. Since the snake attacks so fast and fiercely, he decides to weaken it first, but his sword can barely do anything against the snake scales. The snake returns for another attack, but Jinwoo dodges out of the way, but he enters the range of the snake's tail. The snake smacks him with its tail and it sends him flying into the water. The snake goes for him underwater, but he quickly swims out to safety. The snake doesn't give him time to breathe as it attacks him once he's out of the water, sending him flying a great distance. As he gets back on his feet, he sees a train flying towards him and he has to run out of the way. He thought he was much stronger, but now that he's against the snake he feels so powerless. He grabs hold of his broken sword and wondering how much stronger he must become to stop being ridiculed constantly. He recalls when Song told him everyone was calling him the weakest hunter ever known mankind. Song told him to work hard and make them change their mind. The snake attacks Jinwoo, sending him flying. Jinwoo tries to regain his balance, but the snake doesn't give him a chance to look cool. It pins him against the wall with its body and crushes him till the wall breaks. Jinwoo knows he was called that nickname because he was weak and helpless. He also knows that someone with overwhelming power will remain defeated, and the weak can do nothing but stand still when faced with the strong. People are looked down on if they are weak, even if they are considerably smart. Jinwoo doesn't want to be gentle anymore. He wants to become strong, and that's why he went into the dungeon. He jumps up like a possessed maniac and grabs the snake. He tries to crawl up its body, but the snake knocks him off. Jinwoo gets back on his feet. He vows not to give up till he gets stronger, and a blue aura engulfs him. His hair begins to stand on end, and the snake attacks, but he blocks it again, wearing out the snake scale. He feels like he's not giving enough, and he tries to put in more effort. Compared to when he was face to face against God, the snake was nothing. The snake attacks again, and Jinwoo jumps into the air and he plunges his sword into a chunk on the snake scale. The snake tries to attack him again, but he blocks it and slices the snake's side to wear out the scales more. He jumps into the air, and the snake uses that opportunity to open up its mouth and swallow Jinwoo. Jinwoo's sword flies into the air, but the snake looks down to see him holding onto it. Jinwoo uses his strength to crush the snake scale, and the snake is hurt. It bobs and weaves, trying to knock Jinwoo off, but Jinwoo holds on tight. He continues pressing down on the snake's neck with all his power, and he eventually defeats it. He levels up after the battle, and a smile crosses his face. He realizes he did get stronger after all, and he picks up the item he got as a reward for winning. It was a dagger, which is twice as strong as his previous sword, and it comes with paralysis and bleeding effects. He also gets a vial of the snake's venom, and he thinks its effects are overpowered. He gets a notification that the dungeon will be reset since he has defeated the boss, and the station returns to its normal state. Jinwoo walks out, but he can't see a person inside. He wonders what the time is. A soldier approaches him asking why he's around the station, and if he didn't hear the announcement. He sees Jinwoo's sword and realizes he's a hunter. He apologizes to him and tells him he'll take him to the site. Jinwoo follows the man, wondering what happened. The soldier briefed him about the dungeon break, and he asks if monsters came out. The soldier tells him most of the monsters have been defeated save for a giant magic beast. Jinwoo would feel the monster from that distance, and he knew that was the boss of the dungeon. The huge magic golem engages the hunters as the police tried to keep citizens behind the barricade. The hunters are giving their all to bring down the golem, but their attacks aren't strong enough to weaken it because it has a high defense. Jinwoo arrives at the site, and he realizes the hunters present don't have a great deal of teamwork. He can also see that most of the hunters are low ranks, and the battle was only prolonged because they had a tank whose rank was a bit high. He looks at the healers and notices there are 2 in D rank and 1 in B rank. The B rank healer is Juhee, but she isn't helping because she's dazed. A fellow healer riles her up to get her to help, but she still hasn't gotten over her encounter with God. She tries to make a healing circle, but she loses concentration and it breaks. Jinwoo notices this, and he sympathizes with her, but he isn't scared anymore. They were facing a D-rank monster, which is lower than the one he just faced. He pulls up his sleeves, getting ready to jump into action. The hunters can hardly hold on for much longer, and they pray for a higher rank hunter to arrive. Jinwoo knows he can defeat the monster as long as he can break its defense. He decides to get it with his most powerful hit. He throws his sword with insane force to break the golem's defense. The hunters use that opportunity to defeat the golem. The tank wonders how they were suddenly able to defeat the golem when their attacks weren't effective a second ago. He looks at Jinwoo's sword, wondering how the golem was defeated by it when the combination of their attacks did nothing. He asks the soldier who brought Jinwoo to the site who threw the sword, and he tries to show the tank, but Jinwoo is gone. The tank is terrified of Jinwoo's power, and he wonders if Jinwoo is a high-rank hunter. Jinwoo looks much stronger now, but he didn't think he would break the monster defense with just one hit. He thinks its vitality was already low before he hit it. As he walks away, Juhee notices him. The story continues. We see the nurses in Jinwoo's hospital gossip about how good his body now looks and how cute he is. Jinwoo is doing his morning workout routine in his hospital room. The nurses wonder when he became so buff that they're always surprised when he takes his clothes off. When he first came to the hospital, he wasn't this buff, but they noticed his shape has improved considerably since he started working out. They wonder if it's humanly possible to gain muscles as fast as Jinwoo did. One of the nurses knocks and enters Jinwoo's room, but she's surprised to see him with his shirt off. He apologizes for having his shirt off, and she apologizes for walking in on him. He goes to put on his shirt, but the nurse can't help but admire the firmness of his muscles. She wonders if he always had such a good physique, but Jinwoo asks her what she wanted to say to him. She snaps back into reality and she tells him it's his day of discharge. She asks him if he still has any discomfort, and he tells her he's fully recovered. She tells him to complete his discharge procedures at the counter when he's ready, and Jinwoo thanks her for taking care of him. On a morning news show, the newscaster introduces Baek Hyun-ho. He is one of the 7 S-rank hunters with an impressive resume. She asks him what his life is like away from his missions, and he tells her he spends it training because daily training is indispensable. He tells her he would get rusty if he didn't simulate actual combat. She asks him if it's untiring, and he tells her that he's used to, since he previously worked as a firefighter. Back then, he knew that a small mistake could endanger the lives of his colleagues. Jina is watching the news when she suddenly realizes she's late. She rushes out of the room and calls out to Jinwoo. He tells her to be careful on her way to school. Jinwoo is rubbing his belly and Jina can't help but notice his abs under his shirt. She asks him if he's been working out and he tells her just a little. She notices the height difference between them. She asks him if the increase in height is also a result of his training. She goes to put on her school shoes before heading out, but Jinwoo comes to hand her an umbrella she forgot. He gives her a friendly shove towards the door and she tells him goodbye. After she leaves, Jinwoo goes into the living room and he looks at his daily tasks. He's completed the other except running, and he decides to do that later. He looks at his stats and he sees that he has unallocated points left. He knows he needs enough strength to deal damage, but it would be worthless if he can't hit his target. He sees the importance of the vitality and perception stats as well. He decides to distribute his points between strength, agility, and perception. He gets a call from his landlord and asks if his rent is due. The landlord tells him he's yet to pay rent for that month. Jinwoo tells him he'll transfer the money and the landlord appreciates his response. He tells Jinwoo to take care of himself and they end the call. Jinwoo still isn't sure if he underwent a second awakening, but he can now kill goblins in an instant, so he should be able to earn enough to make a living. He sits on the couch and scrolls through open dungeons he can clear. He knows he has to get a high-level dungeon to get anything meaningful, but he won't be qualified because of his low rank. He contemplates a reevaluation which will give him a higher rank and put him under the spotlight. With the increased attention he would be able to make more money, but he knows people with a second reawakening are rare and hunters whose stats increase with a level increase are non-existent. He knows how annoying the media can be and decides to drop the idea. He decides to keep his powers a secret till he understands it better. He gets a notification on his phone and he's surprised. He immediately puts on his clothes and goes out to a location. He completes his daily task in the process, and he's about to accept his reward when a man calls out to him. The man introduces himself as Hwang Dong-suk and Jinwoo introduce himself to the man. The man figures out that he's an E-rank adventurer and one of his party members recognizes Jinwoo. He tells the man Jinwoo is famous for being the weakest hunter. Another of his members begins to laugh at Jinwoo's nickname, but Dong-suk tells them to cut it out. He apologizes for their behavior, and he asks the man if he can join them to raid the dungeon. Dong-suk tells him he can tag along to make up for the numbers. He tells him the requirements to enter the dungeon and he tells Jinwoo he won't get any spoils, but they'll pay him a commission. He looks at them and he sees there are 4 C-rank hunters and 2 hunters who are D-rank or lower. Jinwoo asks the man what he will be doing, and the man tells him he will carry their luggage containing their stuff. Jinwoo asks the man if he didn't bring a healer. The man tells him it's difficult for a private team like his to recruit a healer, but they have always managed like that. Though Jinwoo's concerned, the man hands him the contract. He reads through and sees that the party won't be liable for any injuries he incurs. He signs it, and another hunter comes to introduce himself as Eugene Ho. He tells Jinwoo he is a D-rank hunter, who was brought in to make up the numbers. Jinwoo is impressed with his gear, and he thinks Jinho is from a rich family. Jinho asks Jinwoo if the bags are too heavy, but he tells him he's right. He tells Jinwoo he doesn't have to speak so formally. They arrive at the gate, but because of how huge it is, they are skeptical it's actually a C-rank gate. Dong-suk tells them the dungeon was given a C rank by investigators. Jinho wonders if it's okay to enter the huge gate, and Jinwoo tells him only the magic flux matters. He tells him the association measures the flux and ranks the gate. Gates that are B rank and above are handled by large guilds, and those below C rank aren't very dangerous. Jinho is amazed by how much Jinwoo knows, and Jinwoo tells him he has been a hunter for a long time. He confesses that it's his first time entering a C-rank dungeon, and Dong-suk tells his party to follow him. They get ready and enter the gate. The dungeon is dark, so Dong-suk tells one of his members to cast a light. He's surprised that there's no monster in sight and no light in the dungeon. There are usually luminescent stones in a dungeon. Jinwoo remembers another dungeon he visited that was also pitch black. Jinho asks Jinwoo what luminescent stones are and he tells him they are glowing rocks common to cave-like dungeons. He tells him they are found on the floor or roof of caves and they emanate light. Jinho is confused by the loads of gems and stones associated with dungeons. Jinwoo tells him he will get used to it. They got deeper into the cave and Jinho was still surprised there was still nothing inside. He asks Jinwoo if there can be a dungeon without monsters, and Jinwoo tells him to keep quiet. Jinwoo listens hard and he can hear monsters round, but they choose to remain hidden. Dong-suk tells his party to get ready for a battle. Jinwoo is surprised that all the monsters are moving together and rushing towards any light source. He tells them it's an insect-type magic beast and the party members aren't pleased to go against insects. They look at the different holes, trying to predict where the insects will attack from. They all get uneasy as the sounds of the insects get closer. Jinwoo listens for the insects and he perceives them in a hole above the party. One of them opens up the hole and Dong-suk tells them he'll attract the insects while the others attack them from behind. Jinho tells Jinwoo to stay by his side so he's protected. Dong-suk uses his taunt skill to attract all the insects to himself and the other members attack the insects. Jinho wants to get into the action but they tell him to stay back. One of the members uses his strongest attack to take down a lot of the insects and the party pushes forward. Jinwoo is impressed with their teamwork but he feels frustrated. They defeat all the insects and Dong-suk asks Jinwoo how he predicted where the insects would come from. Jinwoo tells him it was his intuition. One of the party members calls out to Dong-suk and they notice the insects were killed by something that bit them and not their swords or magic. They figure out that there could be a monster who preys on the insects. Jinwoo tells Jinho to be cautious because his gear is so expensive. Elsewhere at the association gym, some hunters are working out when they hear a huge explosion. Some are surprised, but one hunter tells them it happens when their guild master is working out. They are impressed with his skills, but Yunho doesn't feel like it's enough for a warm-up. Back in dungeon, Jinwoo tells Jinho more about dungeons, and he asks Jinwoo if he can manage the luggage in such a huge dungeon. Jinwoo tells him he's fine earning more without fighting, but he's suspicious because the deal is too good to be true. He's still uneasy that the group doesn't have a healer and they had to make up monsters. They find more half-dead insects and they're even more suspicious. They think the dungeon boss is around the corner. They're about to move ahead and Dong-suk asks his party member to light up the cave. They move forward, cutting through cobwebs, thinking the boss room is ahead. They find a lot of mana crystals that could make them millionaires. Everyone is fantasizing about what they'll use their newfound wealth to do. Jinho looks at Jinwoo's contract and he tells Dong-suk that Jinwoo should get some crystals since they aren't considered spoils. He tells Jinho, Jinwoo will get his share as soon as they defeat the boss. They have to move the crystals before defeating the boss because the gate to the dungeon will close. They decide to use the opportunity. Since the boss is sleeping, Dong-suk asks his member for his tools, but he tells Dong-suk he left them back at their car. Dong-suk tells Jinho and Jinwoo to stay back while they get the tools to move the crystals. Jinho isn't comfortable with it, but Dong-suk assures him they are safe because the boss is asleep. Those C-rank dungeons require 8 people to clear them. Jinwoo then remembers Dong-suk said they've always cleared dungeons with 6 members. He wonders why there aren't regulars to fill up the number deficit. As they walk out of the room, Dong-suk tells one of his members to seal off the room. They seal off the room and Jinho realizes they've been betrayed. Jinwoo remembers when Song-yi told him about people who do such things and get away with it easily because there is no surveillance in the dungeons. Jinho tried to break through the wall but it was too strong. The dungeon boss awakens and approaches them. Jinwoo almost feels powerless, then he remembers his encounter with God and he gains confidence. He tells Jinho to step back because he will defeat the monster. He brings out his sword from his inventory and walks forward to face the boss. That brings the episode to an end. Thanks for watching. Want next part? Subscribe the channel and turn on notification bell.